Hi, and welcome to session 2 of the Global Expansion Ideas 2010. My name is Lucas Spies. My company is Global Capiche. Today we're going to be talking about the effects of culture on global business. Let's get started. A couple things to clarify before we get into the meat and potatoes. One, this information really only applies in working environments. It would be hard to transfer this information into how you interact with people outside of the workplace. 2, don't underestimate the power of culture on everyday interactions. Everyday interactions meaning is how you operate during the day. Culture affects everything about how you deal with other people, especially when you're in another culture. If you have the same cultural differences, if you're from the same culture, you're not going to be able to see stuff the way you would if you were in another culture. You'd be able to pick up on a lot more. I wanted to mention stereotypes. Stereotypes, when used properly, can be very effective in helping you to get through your experience and your international experience. Basically, what I mean by that is that if you aren't stereotyping and you're taking every situation for the same way, you're using a lot of brain power in how to get through every kind of occurrence that happens. For example, an email, or what does this person mean in a telephone conversation. Stereotyping will help you get through that a little bit better. You don't have to consider every single detail every single time you talk with someone. You'll be able to pick up on small things easier. There are tools that will help you operate effectively in foreign countries. We're going to go over that. Learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I have an example later on in this. I do like to mention that now, though, because that's an important facet of this here. All right. So what makes up a person? This is a concept that's pretty widely used in international environments about how to, what is a person. This is the iceberg metaphor. Basically, you have 3 different real significant areas in who you are. One is your personal traits. This would be your personal preferences, if you like blue or green, or what kind of food you like. What makes you special? What makes you independent of everyone else? Subcultural traits. This is what kind of is the variation on this metaphor. Most of the tools you see online that use this don't cover the subcultural traits, but that's important. So what makes up your subgroup? For example, if you are into baseball culture, Major League Baseball, you would have your own type of subcultural norms that make you involved in that. Or if you are into music or something like that, what makes your group special and independent would have an impact on who you are. But the biggest and most important factor to consider is your cultural background. Basically, these are deeply held beliefs and accepted norms of the way you should act. And it's the largest part of the whole iceberg, and it has the biggest impact. So it's very important that we consider that. And that's why I want to use this iceberg, because the personal traits is only a very small portion of what makes you you. The rest of this is very, very important. Okay, so what makes up culture? COI is the Cultural Orientations Indicator. We'll get over that in a little bit. But basically, these are dimensions that can differ from culture to culture, from country to country. Basically, it's divided into 10 different categories depending on what your source is, but environment, time, action, communication, space, power, individualism, competitiveness, structure, and thinking. Each country has its own way of dealing with each other. The people there would, for example, how punctual are they? Are they doing or being? And we'll go over this stuff in a minute here in more detail. But basically, this is what it looks like in a pie pie graph. Okay, so this is how that breaks down. I'm going to go over here. You have, in thinking, deductive and inductive is basically how you think, linear and systemic. I'm going to post these slides up. I don't want to read everything word for word. That's a lot here to take in. Order and flexibility for structure. Your environment. Are you control-oriented, harmony, constraint-oriented? Time, are you single focus or multi-focus? Are you fixed or fluid? Are you past, present, or future? Action, are you a being person or a doing person? Communication, are you high context, low context? Do you speak in a direct or an indirect way? Expressive or instrumental, formal or informal? Space, private or public, how close are you when you talk with people? Hierarchy, this is a power, a hierarchy or equality. Basically, how close are you? Can you just speak to the next level up, or can you jump steps and speak a few levels up? Individualism, is your culture an individualistic or a collectivistic culture? Is it universalistic or particularistic? And competitiveness, are you competitive or cooperative? And all these things have a big impact on how business is conducted and how people interact with each other. What I put in here is an example. Again, using the cultural orientation indicator. This is by Cultural Navigator. TMC is the one who came up with this. This is a comparison between a Canadian culture and a Mexican culture. So basically, if you were to take this cultural orientation indicator and find out kind of where you stand and what your personal preferences are, you could compare yourself into how you would operate and what you would need to focus on when you're operating another culture. In this case, it's a normal Canadian citizen and a normal Mexican citizen. How would they interact with each other? Okay, so you can see that the Canadian culture is more control-oriented in terms of the environment. The Mexican's more harmony-orientated. So if the person is a Canadian and operating in Mexico, they would have to work a little bit more to get into the harmony mindset. They would have to focus on being, instead of being so control-oriented, how can we harmonize more? How can we make things smooth over a little bit? Time focus, the Canadian would be more single-focused in time. Mexican would be more multi-focused in time. How they perceive time. Are you able to single task, multitask? Other differences, the Canadian does a little bit more doing, the Mexican culture would be a little bit more being. Communication, this is kind of important, we'll get into this again later, but low context and high context. So what that means is that when a Mexican would be communicating with another Mexican, there would be a lot of information that would be exchanged outside of the verbal communication. It wouldn't just be expressing every single idea like how the Canadian might do. The Mexican would have more information that's in the message. So for the Canadian to operate in Mexico, they would have to learn to be more receptive to the messages and learn how to open themselves up and see, well, could he also be describing something else? Is there something that's kind of not mentioned here that is significant? Direct or indirect. Maybe the Canadian would be right to the point. The Mexican might beat around the bush a little bit when it comes to a certain subject. Instrumental or versus expressive, formal, and the Mexicans are formal also. So the communication would be a big area they would need to work on. The Canadian would be able he would need to go in, and pay more attention and be mindful of how he's operating when he's communicating within the Mexican culture. Some other areas: equality, individualism. There's some other things here that would Canadian need to be attentive of. But as you can see, this is a good tool to use when you're going to go into another culture, you know, can compare yourselves, what areas you need to work on, and that way you can be aware of that.